own place.
I don't own copyrights. Fair use.
And we can go to another place and choose 2 to 3 girls. Basically choose the best ones, and that is that.
We know that there are sex workers in London. What made this the story was really the fact that they were being trafficked and held against their will.
The customer base for these women stretches to famous footballers, politicians and serious business tycoons in this country.
These women have to service men, and we're talking sometimes 30 men a night. That's a lot of guys, 230 a week.
These aren't just small operations. We're talking hundreds of millions of pounds being made in these affluent areas, and these women aren't seeing any of it. I'm Lucy Watson. I am a correspondent for ITV News. Exposing the dark underbelly of society is something I feel very strongly about.
I'm Tam Hussain. I'm an investigative journalist for ITV News. And the night I got the story, we'd been out on an awards night and we stepped out of the taxi. And the first thing that happens is one of these guys comes up and says to me, "Look man, do you want something?"
Free drinks. Do me something. It's a high class.
This guy, of course, offered me drugs and sex. So I said to him, "Listen man, what are you doing? What are you doing? Why are you doing this?" Turns out that he was very, very well educated. And he was just caught in this situation. And I said, "Look man, why don't we expose this?"
I remember getting the call from Tam. I was sitting in my kitchen and he told me all about this meeting, this guy, and what he thought the story was.
I went to Lucy and said, "Look, what do you think?"
And I was instantly excited by it. I wanted to expose it. I wanted to know more. After the guy approached Tam, Tam took his number and carried on chatting to him over a number of weeks.
So I started digging, and I started to just map out these houses.
To get the footage in the brothel, we had to, of course, go into one. The area where we discovered these brothels is probably one of the most affluent areas in London. It's one of the most expensive postcodes in the country. I mean, you only need to drive down the street on any night of the week and there are Ferraris. It's the playground for the rich, the famous and royalty. We discovered in a very small area 15 to 20 brothels and at least 5 to 10 women in these brothels every single night.
This is a very, very sophisticated network that goes all the way back to Eastern Europe and Albania.
We all know that prostitution exists and many women do it out of choice. We were not exposing that. What we wanted to expose was the fact that so many women in this country are used in this industry against their will and are living in fear.
They train them until they are 18 in Romania, and then they sell them in the Western countries. And it's very difficult to help them when they are in your countries because they've been in this situation for 4 or 5 years. There is no other life they know.
These girls were groomed from a very, very young age. They think they're going to have a great job. They'll send them to places like Amsterdam and London. But actually, they go into prostitution because they have to pay this debt off.
They're quite often held here under a debt bondage, which is basically anything that the trafficker has spent, plane ticket, a ferry ticket, petrol to get them here, chewing gum, a cigarette, makeup. All of these costs mount up and there's interest. They can never pay this off. And then that threat goes back to their family.
You could even give them their passport, it's fine. Because all this gang member needs to do is just show a picture of her mum and say, "Look, we're 10 minutes away." That's it. She's not going to go anywhere.
When you're in the area of Mayfair, it's not as simple as just going out with a secret camera and filming this activity. Quite often street sellers, beggars are the eyes and the ears of these organised crime groups. They are clocking your behaviour.
I don't think anyone wants to get involved with the Albanian gangs. I think that was the risk. We went to a place where this eccentric man comes up with these different cameras. It's something out of James Bond, and you'd give your shirt and he'd rig it up. Or he'd put a little camera on your button and he'll talk you through what you have to do. So we had my colleague who you see filming with me.
And their story was...
I was showing my northern friend what London life was like.
They were on a night out. The businessman from the north wanted a prostitute and wanted to pay for it, Tam was going to facilitate that because he had contacts, he knew pimps in this area.
I built up a relationship with one of the drivers, who we see in the film, who then took us. He calls himself a driver, it's a euphemism for pimp. When you go in, it's not like a luxury flat with really, really nice furniture. You go in and there's 10 to 15 girls just sitting in front of you, and it's a bizarre thing when the girls come in and they're sitting there and you have to choose. It's quite dehumanizing.
The people who are paying for sex are paying around £300 an hour. Politicians,
Footballers that you and I know of, you know instantly are using this.
Often these men are drunk, and then when they're taken to the brothels, they are offered drugs for free if they're paying for the women. These men aren't just handing over cash either, they are handing over credit cards. Sometimes these men can be there for days because they are so drugged up, but they're paying an hourly rate. So they can come out of their days later having spent tens of thousands of pounds, and they can't exactly go and explain to the police or their loved ones, oh, this is where all the money's gone.
I suppose the brazenness of the whole thing. So we've got, being offered the girls, being offered the coke, and then when we go there, you've got the girl all lined up.
We had the footage analysed, and there were clear indicators that these women were being held against their will. There was a woman who would sit in the corner of the room and she would be monitoring the women's behaviour. Out of the 5, we managed to determine that probably at least 3, maybe 4 were from Romania. That seems to be where the vast majority of women who are used in brothels are coming from.
Romanians are the main European population that is being exploited in the UK. The promise of a better life turns into a nightmare. There's no way that they can go back home because there's this pressure and this shame. Then not only are you a failure in your eyes, but you're a failure in the community's eyes and the family's eyes.
This investigation didn't just happen overnight. It took nearly 6 months from when we first had that conversation.
So this story came out at News at 10 in September.
The purpose of doing an investigation like this is about increasing the public, the authorities' understanding of the situations that these women find themselves in and why they're in those situations.
You can't look at them as criminals. You have to look at them as victims. They have to be believed.
As a result of our investigation, it empowered the all-party parliamentary group to once again push the Home Secretary into the idea of criminalising the purchasing of sex and decriminalising the victims.
Recent figures came out, talking about the situation remains dire. Even to this day, I'm still getting messages saying that, we moved to a different address and that there's a party happening in Mayfair. So that's why when people say, has things changed? I think, well, maybe not, because I'm still getting these texts.